Coast Guard operations are inherently perilous. In a severe storm, a crew's survival depends entirely on rigorous training and immediate institutional support. To modernize this critical force, the Ministry of Defense recently mandated two progressive policy shifts. First, short service appointments were made entirely gender-neutral, giving female officers equal operational footing. Second, the ministry recently streamlined ex gratia payments for personnel lost at sea. Instead of forcing families through a protracted legal maze, administrative authorities can now declare a missing service member presumed dead, expediting immediate financial relief. This brings us to the desk of Lieutenant Commander Arjun Mehta. He holds the file of Havildar Vinod Kumar, a guardsman swept away during a rescue operation 3 years prior. Under the new directive, Vinod's family is immediately eligible for 42 lakh rupees in held compensation. Yet 3 years post-incident, his widow has liquidated her jewelry to survive, and his son has abandoned school for day labor. We see a severe disconnect. A well-designed directive at the highest levels of government provides zero utility if the localized administrative machinery refuses to execute it when human lives hang in the balance. The bottleneck in this system has a name: Commandant Rawat. For 4 months, he has deliberately stalled Havildar Vinod's fully compliant file. Rawat is driven by a specific, pervasive institutional anxiety, audit fear. Recent aggressive financial reviews on similar cases have conditioned him to prioritize his own procedural safety over his mandated duties. To enforce this delay, Rawat wields a structural weapon. He controls Lieutenant Commander Mehta's annual confidential report, the exact metric dictating Mehta's future career trajectory. Rawat's directive is explicit, but verbal: slow walk the file. If an audit raises a red flag, the responsibility falls entirely on his subordinate, leaving Rawat with a spotless record. This creates a severe ethical trap. On one side, Mehta faces the strict hierarchy of institutional loyalty. On the other, his conscience demands he assists a desperate family, legally entitled to relief. Breaking this deadlock without career suicide requires a structured, framework-driven escalation. We evaluate Mehta's choices through an ethical decision matrix, testing options against philosophical frameworks. The first path is passive compliance. Mehta obeys the order, leaving the file buried. His performance report remains pristine, but the family is completely abandoned. The philosopher Immanuel Kant provides a clear lens for this scenario through his categorical imperative. Kant argued humans must be treated as an end, never merely as a means. Subjecting a widow to poverty simply to protect a performance review violates this rule, reducing a citizen to a disposable instrument. Silently accepting an unethical delay is not neutrality, it is active complicity. The second option is direct confrontation, where Mehta aggressively bypasses his commanding officer, igniting a highly visible bureaucratic fight. This feels like immediate, righteous justice. However, it severely risks his tenure and fractures the institutional discipline necessary for the Coast Guard to function. To analyze this choice, we turn to Aristotle, who proposed the concept of the golden mean. He observed that true virtue is found in the balanced center, firmly between deficiency and excess. A scorched earth confrontation is an excess of passion. It might feel virtuous in the moment, but it ultimately destroys Mehta's capacity to navigate the system and deliver actual results. Righteous anger lacks utility without discipline. Sabotaging hierarchy degrades the state's capacity to function. The third path is structured escalation. Mehta compiles the documented facts and officially requests written confirmation of Rawat's verbal order to halt. Demanding written instruction traps the commanding officer. Rawat must formally document his delay, taking direct accountability, or he must back down, entirely neutralizing his leverage over Mehta's performance review. This approach aligns directly with the philosophical framework of Mahatma Gandhi, who insisted on an inseparable link between means and ends. He famously argued that a just and pure destination cannot possibly be reached through corrupt, opaque, or otherwise destructive methods. By utilizing rigorous, transparent legal documentation, Mehta employs pure means. He secures the family's rightful compensation, a pure end, without violating institutional integrity. This approach achieves Aristotle's golden mean, assertive enough to break the bureaucratic stall, yet strictly procedural enough to shield the officer and the institution. While Mehta's structured approach solves the immediate case, Relying exclusively on the individual moral courage of junior officers is a systemic vulnerability. We must examine the institutional architecture that permitted a commanding officer to weaponize his fear of audits. The first necessary reform is time-bound disposal rules. Mandating a strict 90-day limit on file decisions mechanically removes the loophole of indefinite stalling. Second, the system requires an independent grievance redressal mechanism, one that is entirely decoupled from the standard chain of command overseeing performance reviews. As recommended by the Second Administrative Reforms Commission, robust whistleblower protections are essential. Officers need a safe channel to report localized paralysis without career suicide. Robust governance does not rely on hoping for ethical personnel. It requires engineering an architecture where unethical delays are procedurally impossible. Even with highly optimized systems, regulations eventually require human interpretation. The architect of the Indian Constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, provided the exact framework for navigating this friction. Ambedkar championed the concept of constitutional morality. This requires an administrator to revere the core intent and spirit of the law, rather than merely executing its literal text mechanically. By obsessing over the rigid letter of financial compliance, Commandant Rawat completely abandoned the spirit of welfare and compassion legally owed to a grieving citizen. The Ministry of Defense designed these sweeping reforms to embody that very spirit of welfare, but their ultimate success dictates administrators who possess both rigorous procedural sharpness and a deep capacity for empathy. Administrative ethics aligns systemic accountability with fundamental human dignity through every daily decision. When rigid procedures inevitably clash with human reality, constitutional morality remains the ultimate compass, ensuring that the state actually serves its people rather than just protecting itself.